As we near the NBA playoffs, the series that fans want to see this year is without a doubt a 7-game brawl between the Los Angeles Lakers and the LA Clippers, featuring LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and 2 rosters of talented role players. Not only is this the very first time in NBA history that the 2 LA teams have been contenders at this high of a level in the same season, but also the histories that many of the players have with each other are storied enough to create one of the greatest NBA narratives of all time. So in this video, we're going to take a look at both teams and the pieces that built the Battle of LA to show how this upcoming series has the potential to be one of the greatest series ever.
I want to go higher!
Obviously, the first dynamic of the 2 teams are the teams themselves. The Clippers and the Lakers have been at odds for a long while now. You have the Lakers, the purple and gold, a stoic franchise with countless legends and 16 championships. The face of the team, LeBron James, the man who has arguably been the most hyped athlete in the 21st century. He embodies everything Hollywood, and so do the teammates around him. On the other side of the coin, the Clippers, always seen as the little brother to the Lakers. They moved to Los Angeles from San Diego in 1984, right in the middle of Magic Johnson's era in the city. Due to poor management, among many other things, the Clippers never even came close to the success of the Lakers, and to this day have yet to win an NBA championship or even reach the finals. Now, this team has Kawhi Leonard, reserved, silent, and under the radar. Leonard is a polar opposite to James in many ways. However, accomplishments are not one of them. And he's surrounded by players who have embodied the underdog identity of the Clippers. This creates a full-blown clash of cultures, and to expand on that, let's talk about the players themselves. The LA Clippers' depth has been given a lot of credit for the franchise's regular season success in recent years, and this team is no different. The Clips have extremely strong pieces off of the bench like Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams, who are both in contention for the 2026 Man of the Year award. Additions like Reggie Jackson, Marcus Morris, and Patrick Patterson, who all have playoff pasts against LeBron, as well as players that fill out the roster and create a pretty deep bench like Zubac, Mo Harkless, Landry Shamet, Rodney McGruder, and JaMychal Green. But in more detail, I want to talk about these 2 Clippers, Patrick Beverley and Joakim Noah. First up, Noah. Joakim Noah signed with the Clippers on a 10-day contract in early March, but never saw the court due to the suspension of the season. Fortunately, he was signed for the remainder of the season in June before the league headed into its bubble in Disney. Noah's NBA story starts in Chicago, where he was drafted 9th by the Bulls in 2007. He would enter the Eastern Conference under siege by a now familiar face, LeBron James, and his team, the division rival Cavaliers. In LeBron's first stint in Cleveland, James and Noah would have a timeline of altercations.
About Cleveland?
Not at all. You like it? You think Cleveland's cool? I mean, I never heard anybody say, I'm going to Cleveland on vacation.
This beef would evolve as LeBron joined Miami and the Bulls rose to contention shortly under Derrick Rose. But after the Bulls dispersed, Noah had a rough time in New York and faded out of the league. He reemerged in Memphis, and after recovering from an Achilles injury, the 35-year-old former Defensive Player of the Year and 2-time All-Star is given not only a chance to win in LA, but the opportunity to finally get one up on LeBron. You either love or you hate Pat Bev. The Clippers' starting point guard is a well-established pest in the league today, but it wasn't always this way for him. Beverley was drafted 42nd by the Lakers, who later traded him to the Miami Heat for cash. However, he never even got the chance to play in Miami. He played in Europe for a year after he was drafted. When he returned, the Heat actually signed Beverley to a deal, but right before the season started, he was waived. This was the year LeBron James took his talents to South Beach. So instead of being a rookie on a contender who got to prove himself, he ended up in Houston, where he would have to prove himself there as a worthy guard in today's league. Here's how he sees it.
Now, I played for Miami. With LeBron, they cut me. I got drafted by the Lakers. They traded me to Miami. Ron got there, they cut me. I remember it like it was yesterday, so yeah, it's a chip on my shoulder.
On the other side, the surrounding cast is pretty strong too. Even without Rajon Rondo and Avery Bradley, the Lakers still are armed with players like Kyle Kuzma, KCP, Alex Caruso, Markieff Morris, and Danny Green. Players who had a few deep playoff run-ins with Kawhi in recent years, like Quinn Cook and JaVale McGee, and even Antetokounmpo. No, not that one. There you go. But the Lakers off the bench we'll be talking about today will be these three: Dion Waiters, Dwight Howard, and J.R. Smith. This is a two-piece, as both guys were in similar boats before porting on the Lakers bench. Dion Waiters started out in Cleveland, then OKC, and Miami, where he would establish himself as a bucket on the floor. Off the floor, however, he was always a little bit sketchy, as he would have his moments, but at the end of the day, everyone would be excited when it was time for Waiters Island. Last year, after missing a lot of time due to an ankle injury, Dion returned to the court, played 4 games, and then he had, let's just call it an incident. It led him to being suspended for a number of games and eventually traded to Memphis, where he would be immediately waived, all while being a laughingstock online for what had happened. Fortunately, the Lakers would give Waiters a chance, signing him in March, and so far, he has proven himself a good addition to the roster. Then, there is the irreplaceable J.R. Smith. Drafted straight out of high school in 2004, Smith has journeyed across the league as a valuable bench scorer, most notably in New York and Cleveland. Besides from a few incidents and everyone online thinking he's constantly faded, everything was going smooth in JR's career, becoming a champion alongside LeBron in 2016. Of course, until it happened. I don't even need to explain. When you think of the 2018 NBA Finals, it's the first image that comes in your head. After that series, LeBron left for Hollywood, and Smith was waived after only 11 games. It would be 612 days after that JR would finally have an opportunity to play the game again. And he did, in the purple and gold. Like Waiters, Smith has shown to be a valuable piece to assist the Lakers, and because of all the doubters, LA acquired both of them for seemingly pennies on the dollar. The story of Dwight Howard is such an interesting subplot in the Lakers' narrative. In the NBA's bubble, Howard is right back where it all began in Orlando. With the number 1 pick in the 2004 draft, the Magic selected Howard straight out of high school. In Florida, Dwight's accolades were overwhelming. 4-time rebound champion, 2-time blocks champion, 6-time All-Star, and 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He even brought the Magic back to the finals for the first time since a young Shaquille O'Neal did in 1995. Although he didn't win because of someone we'll talk about soon, Howard's stint in Orlando arguably was enough to make him a Hall of Famer. But the Magic organization had a lot of issues, and so did Dwight. This eventually left him to leave Florida and sign with the Lakers. where a super team was formed consisting of Kobe Bryant, Steve Nash, and Howard himself, or so everyone in 2012 believed. The team battled chemistry issues, went through 3 different coaches, and lost a lot more games than everyone thought. The team was riddled with injuries through and through. Kobe butted egos with Howard, Nash was 38, and Dwight was recovering from back surgery that would keep him from 100% for most of the year. By the end of that season, Kobe suffered his infamous Achilles injury, and the team was humiliated by San Antonio in a sweep. Many of the fans of the Lakers front office weren't happy with the Dwight experiment, so he left for Houston to play with James Harden. However, his time with the Rockets was just as unsuccessful and plagued by injury. In 2016, Howard would sign with his hometown Hawks, played a season, and Atlanta let him walk. In 2017, he signed with Charlotte, played a season, then the Hornets let him walk. In 2018, he was shipped to Washington, where he only played 9 games before having season-ending surgery. This was a former 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He was still a walking double-double, and he was only 32 years old. Something else had to be up for teams to not see him of any more value than just an experiment to fill the starting center spot. So what was the issue? Well, it was Dwight Howard. Over the years, he had built a reputation for being an awful locker room presence and a lazy teammate on the court. It had become such an issue that by 2019, Howard was out of a job. It was during that time where Howard states that it was one of the lowest points in his life, and he spent a lot of it on self-reflection and being humble. His efforts to improve himself paid off when the Lakers agreed to sign him to a 1-year deal last summer. Now, like Waiters and Smith, Dwight is on a redemption arc of his own to make up for his last stint in LA, to finally become an NBA championship contender, and to finally be part of a brotherhood. This upcoming postseason run is a very important one for Paul George, but it isn't his first. George was drafted to an upstart Pacers squad led by the likes of Danny Granger and Roy Hibbert, and by his 3rd season in the league, he blossomed into a star. It was at this time where Indiana became serious threats in the East, to the point where they managed to reach back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals. But there was a team in the way, and this team was run by none other than LeBron James. Both series, the Pacers put up a fight, even pushing the Heat to 7 games in 2013. However, Indiana could never get past the Heat's Big Three. After a devastating leg injury during a Team USA scrimmage, George returned better than ever in 2015. Unfortunately, his remaining years in Indiana were more of the same. He just couldn't get past LeBron, and the Pacers just couldn't win. In 2017, he demanded a trade and was dealt to the Thunder. In his first year there, he teamed up with the reigning MVP and Russell Westbrook, and a third option in the prolific Carmelo Anthony. But by the time the playoffs arrived, the Thunder entered as just the 4th seed. George had a strong Game 1 that birthed the nickname Playoff P, but at the end of the day, Anthony was ineffective, George had fizzled out completely, and Westbrook was polarizing. They lost that series to rookie Donovan Mitchell and the Utah Jazz in 6 games. The following season seemed much different. George had an incredible regular season, so incredible that only James Harden and Giannis had a better year, as PG finished 3rd in MVP voting. The Thunder as a whole finished as the 6th seed in an admittedly stronger Western Conference. However, George entered the first round battling a shoulder injury that hindered his performance for a majority of the series, and by now, everyone knows how that series ended. That shot sent OKC into a full restructure, allowing PG to finally play for home, sending him to the Clippers, while Westbrook was shipped to join his former teammate, fellow MVP, and close friend James Harden in Houston. Still recovering from his shoulder surgeries, George's first season with the Clippers wasn't as electrifying as his 2019 campaign. Luckily, the suspension has allowed him to fully heal, and now, with the reigning Finals MVP as his running mate, he has an opportunity to solidify his career with a championship, and maybe even more exciting, a chance to finally get one over LeBron. Anthony Davis isn't lacking in talent, often regarded as the best big man in today's game, especially before the eruption of the Greek Freak. He doesn't lack in honors either. In only 8 seasons in the league, Davis won Rookie of the Year award, followed up by 7 consecutive All-Star appearances, 3 blocking titles, and 3 All-NBA selections. What AD is lacking in is postseason success. Due to the hostile Western Conference of the 2010s, Davis's susceptibility to minor injuries, and New Orleans' inability to build a contending roster around him, Davis's Pelicans only managed 2 playoff appearances during the 7 years he spent there. The first time, Davis got to the playoffs off of a wild game winner, only to get swept in 4 games by Steph Curry and the eventual champion. The second appearance was in 2018, with the Pelicans getting in with the help of DeMarcus Cousins. Cousins was arguably neck and neck with Davis for the title of best big man in the league, and after being traded from Sacramento to join AD, the two were one of the greatest twin tower duos the league had seen. Unfortunately, Cousins suffered a career-altering Achilles tear before the playoffs, and Davis was left to fend off the West for himself. In the first round, they upset Portland in a sweep, credited to the defense of Drew Holiday on the star tandem of Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum, as well as the routine performance of playoff Rondo. The following round didn't go as well, meaning the Warriors once again, this time with Kevin Durant. That was the last time Davis would see a postseason in a Pels jersey. Eventually, the failure of New Orleans was too much for AD, and his relationship with the organization fizzled out until he was freed to the Lakers in a blockbuster trade that would inevitably give the Pelicans Zion Williamson and the Lakers' young core of Ingram, Ball, and Harden. Now in Los Angeles, Davis has continued his level of play to the point where he is in heavy contention for the Defensive Player of the Year award, and going into the postseason as the number 1 seed in the West alongside LeBron. Davis finally has a shot at a championship and even a Finals MVP to solidify his spot on the list of NBA's great power forwards. Honestly, Kawhi Leonard doesn't have much left to prove in his career. He was fortunate enough to get traded into a dynasty, but talented enough to stand out and help the aging Spurs core win one more in 2014, where San Antonio, in an act of revenge, defeated LeBron and the Big Three Heat, and Leonard was named the Finals MVP of the series at only 22 years old. As Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili all neared retirement one by one, Kawhi exploded into a star in the league and a defensive juggernaut, winning the Defensive Player of the Year award back-to-back. By 2017, Leonard was a full-blown MVP candidate, but in the same year, he suffered an infamous quad injury that would temporarily derail his career. This injury would eventually spark an issue in San Antonio, an organization that usually has no problems ever, suddenly had a disgruntled superstar, who, after recovering, played 9 games the next year, and just didn't play in a Spurs jersey ever again. And so the Spurs had to find a team who could offer enough in return for Kawhi. On the other side of the league, the Raptors were just humiliated once again by LeBron James and the Cavaliers, and the front office could no longer put up with the Dwayne Casey and DeMar DeRozan experiment. Toronto was more than willing to take the risk of acquiring Leonard, who only had a year left on his contract. So the teams agreed to a swap, and Kawhi eventually did play for Toronto and won a championship and Finals MVP, his second for both awards, all in 1 year in the East, becoming one of 3 players to win Finals MVP for 2 separate franchises. Leonard's run in Toronto boosted his legacy greatly, and many began to wonder if he was the best player in the world, while others discredited him because of his frequent resting that would birth the load management movement. But Kawhi rested often because of his nagging injury, the same quad that he injured in 2017. It continues to bother him to this day. Aside from that, the next question was, would Kawhi stay in Toronto? The Raptors roster was proven to get it done with Leonard, and many wondered the potential of a Raptors dynasty if Kawhi re-signed with the team. The answer was no, and Kawhi instead went home and signed a 2-year deal to the LA Clippers. Now on the Clippers, Kawhi is once again in a situation to win a title, and all eyes are on him to see if he can come through once again and win another franchise their first NBA championship. And then there was the King. With 16 seasons under his belt, there is so much you can say about LeBron James. Undisputedly the most discussed, slandered, and praised player in the NBA for years now. Everybody knows his journey. The first stint in Cleveland, the Big Three in Miami, the homecoming in 2016, and his incredible 2018 season. And surprising to none, he has a lot on the line in a series against the Clippers as well. Throughout the video, we've seen the ties other players have with James. But what about LeBron himself? Well, at 35 years old, this is James' first playoff appearance in the Western Conference. After suffering a groin injury last season and failing to rally back into the picture after he returned, LeBron is looking to prove that he can dominate the West like he did in the East. Another fold to the story is his matchup with Kawhi Leonard. We've already discussed the dynamic that will carry over from going back and forth with each other in the final runs during the Heat days. But what about last season? Like I said, James was given heavy criticism for not being able to make the playoffs during his first year in the West. And barring his injury, there was still a window of success that he just didn't achieve. Meanwhile, in Kawhi's first and only season in the East, he was doing what LeBron did for the last decade, dominate the conference. While James was having his first extended offseason since 2005, Leonard was going on a historic run and adding another Finals MVP to his resume. Going into these playoffs, even after another impressive MVP campaign, LeBron has to prove he can lead in year 16 against most competitive and exciting Western contenders in recent years. In a series between the Clippers, LeBron has a chance to stand ground on his title as King and stop Kawhi from getting a shot at catching up to him in the ring department, and of course, get one chip closer to the coveted number 6. Now in the bubble, the playoffs are ready to go, and the games so far have yet to disappoint, even with the first round matchups presenting some coveted storylines for the fans. But between the past, the present, and how much both sides have on the line this summer, hopefully, the basketball gods will deliver, and the Western Conference Finals matchup between the Lakers and the Clippers will give us one of the greatest series ever.